So, got a little bit of a video for you today. This probably isn't gonna go up until the morning, just because it's almost 9 p.m. Pacific time as I record this. But, so first of all, I'd like to apologize for not showing my face in this. I think I'm actually coming down with something, for like the third time in about 2 months. So, yeah, but, just wanted to show this little article. This is from Bounding in the Comics. Link's gonna be in the description. So, hashtag Kickvic and the Violet Wanderers podcast discusses strategies to publicly label Vic Mignogna as a sexual predator to prevent further con appearances. And, this was actually published, today on the 8th of January, so let's go on ahead and, just go through this. I'll give you guys my opinion. Here we go. 3 of the leading voices in the hashtag Kickvic movement, Renfamous, Old Renfamous, JNMontello, and Kaylin Marzgurl Saucedo urged their fans and supporters to directly contact conventions to prevent any potential appearances by Vic Mignogna during a recent podcast guest appearance. The 3 appeared on the 65th podcast, the 65th episode of The Violent Wanderers, a podcast self-described as, quote, gallows humor for the terminally online queer community, hosted by Alexis and Ian Filth. Filth is a fitting name here. According to Alexis, the 3 appeared to discuss, quote, AnimeGate and ComicsGate chuds. Whatever a chud is. At the top of the podcast, as Alexis speaks to JNMontello and asks her to introduce herself for listeners who may be unfamiliar with her role in the movement, Montello provides some brief details about herself before immediately pointing to Mignogna as the problem in the anime community that's taken, quote, front and center. I'm old retired con staff and basically ended up coming into 2019 and seeing that we're dealing with last decade's problems in anime between Vic Mignogna and a whole bunch of others, but he's kind of taken front and center. It's just one of those things where everyone knew about it for some reason, but it was Whisper Network. It was, you know, quote, don't look behind the curtain. Montello then equates Mignogna's fanbase to a cult, comparing them to the fervent supporters of alleged sexual predator and musician R. Kelly or members of the sex cult Nixum. R. Kelly? Okay. Don't know anything about him, but alright. Montello, quote, obviously with hashtag MeToo and this blowing up, but then of course, Vic spent 15 years of being enabled in building a cult. Actually, no, he was building a fan base. He was building a very dedicated fan base that really wanted him to continue appearing at places, until you idiots opened your mouths. But I digress. You can compare him to R. Kelly, I swear. Compare the fandoms. Alexis, here's the Nixism of anime. Montello, more or less. As the conversation continues, the group begins to discuss whether exposure campaigns such as the hashtag Kickvic movement will have any lasting impact on convention culture and guest invitation standards, with an emphasis on the prevention of Mignogna from taking any further convention appearances. Montello and Renfamous state that it's a matter of, quote, money and, quote, self-interest, and that it's, quote, going to come down to the staying power of the people who've criticized him. Montello, quote, ultimately, it's going to keep coming down to money. It's going to come down to self-interest. It's going to be about doing what's easy because it's, you know, quote, well, we have all these fans that are going to come. Butts in seats. This is how conventions determine who they invite typically. It's, quote, how many butts are they going to get in seats? How many tickets is he going to push? Actually, it's a lot more than that, but I'll get into that at the end of the video. Or at the end of this article, rather. Renfamous. Whether or not Vic's Day is gone... my bad, I forgot the quotes, but whatever. Whether or not Vic's Day is gone is going to come down to the staying power of the people who've criticized him. Staying power of the people who've made an effort to ensure that what he's done has been spread around and that they've been putting pressure on the companies, putting pressure on the cons. If people burn out and they aren't caring about this as much in a year, cons will obviously bring him back. Well, actually, we've already seen that start. We've seen multiple conventions go back on their word in terms of canceling him, which is entirely a good thing. That's entirely a good thing that they're bringing him back, and that they're not caving to these Kickvic monsters. But yeah, and as the year goes on, I have a feeling that list is only going to get bigger in terms of, the cons that are bringing him back. Because, people are expressing an interest in wanting him to return to, to make an appearance, to make appearances. They also state that Manana's recurring convention appearances were done solely because, quote, people felt that they had to bring Vic back because he would move tickets. Again, there's actually a lot more to that than well, not necessarily this article, but than they're letting on. But again, I'll get into that at the end of this article. Telling fans that they need to be, quote, vigilant, the pair then call on, quote, imposing potential financial consequence to the degree that they're not even willing to risk it on the conventions through complaints and backlash. So basically, they're calling for riots. At least that's what I'm getting from this. Renfamous, quote, if people are vigilant, I almost said vigilant. If people are vigilant, it's not going to be immediate, but once the cons have hardship, once there's no longer the impetus of, well, yeah, it's been a couple years and maybe he's learned his lesson, he's really struggling, but he still has that ardent fan base. Montello, quote, the threat of backlash needs to have an imposing potential financial consequence to the degree that they're not even willing to risk it. So basically, you're saying to go after the cons and threaten their livelihood for basically having him. You guys are as bad as Real, Sabat, and Toye. Anyway. Well, actually, no, you guys are far worse considering the fact that, well, at least one of you was the one that started this whole charade. Marzgurl. Anyway. Alexis then calls on listeners of The Violent Wanderer to campaign against any potential appearance Manana may have near them. Alexis, you hear that, TVW Dungeoneers? If you hear of any conventions having Vic manage a Troyes? Okay, that's a mouthful. Coming to your town, you need to get your, that, and, butts off the couch and tell them you were going to show up until you heard this something was coming on. I have so many problems with that, with that sentence. I don't know if I want to talk about it now. I'll just move on and then I'll come back to that as well. The group then turned to discussing specific tactics that could be used to achieve this goal, including pointing to various Google searches associated with his name, with Vic's name, and the accusations of sexual misconduct, and informing local communities that a, quote, documented sexual harasser, where's the documentation on that, would be around their children. Montello, quote, they key points to hit are the fact that he has a reputation now, and there's a documented reputation that he has now. The fact that you can Google his name, Renfamous. You cannot play dumb anymore. It was playing dumb for a long time. This whole, quote, we didn't know nonsense is BS. However, you can't play dumb anymore. Montello, right, but having these things in the media that are readily accessible, what things would those be? What things would those be? Are you talking about doctored photos again? Or debunked stories? My gosh. That are readily accessible is the way you go to a small local con that has invited Vic Mignogna, go to the local media and say, quote, look, your local convention has invited controversial potential child predator, sexual harasser, whatever you want to use, because all those words have been used in the media. Look at what our local con has invited upon us and invited upon your children, invited our community. It's a big deal for a smaller con or a medium-sized con. Alexis, there is a perverse sense in irony that I have, that I would be able to turn around the, quote, won't somebody think of the children on some of these right-wing chuds. Saucedo, news outlets such as Variety or NPR are no small town news outlets, you know? I'd say that I'd say those are pretty big places to point to and be able to say, quote, this is the kind of coverage this person received. It's not exactly positive. It's not just nerd outlets where nerd reporters were reporting on a nerd thing that were happening in the nerd world. It's in the local paper in Dallas. Which is totally not a biased and liberal-motivated paper in any way, shape, or form. But I digress. Montello. Right, if you have a hypocritical con going on in Garland, Texas, and the, quote, Garland Times-Herald has nothing else to talk about that day, you can get front-page news that the local Garland con has invited a documented sexual harasser to attend with your children. That's the kind of pressure they respond to. They don't respond well to weeb tweets as well as they do that kind of pressure. Alright. I guess I'm ready to critique this. Let me just go ahead and get back up to the first thing I wanted to talk about here. So, to building a cult. He was actually building a really dedicated fan base. Like I said before, Vic was building a very dedicated fan base, and he still has that fan base now. Which, I mean, I'm really grateful that he still has that he still has all of us to support him and everything. But being enabled, what are you saying? Are you saying that he did something to people for 15 years at cons? Because again, if so, someone would have a picture of it or a video of it, especially given the fact that it's the year 2020 now, so we're talking since at least 2005, at which point, well, actually no, the iPhone didn't release until 2007. And they didn't really get big in people's hands until the 2010s. But even then, the 2010s to 2020 is a decade. The start of the decade to the beginning of the decade, that's to the end of the decade, that's 10 years in total. So you're telling me that no one had a... Again, it's like with the Jelly Bean story. You're telling me that in front of an enormous crowd of people where this allegedly happened, and where this, quote, enabling happened, not a single person got a photo or a video of it when smartphones were all the rage in the 2010s, and they still are going into the 2020s now? Next one is, where the next piece of criticism I want to throw at this thing, well, not really at the article again, because I mean, this article is just reporting what was said, more at the podcast and these people, is basically that when Montello says it's going to keep coming down to money, yeah, to a degree, from a financial standpoint, the con does exist to make money based off of whether or not they bring Vic in. But it's a lot more than that, because a lot of the people that come to the con to see Vic they obviously want to see Vic. They obviously want to see Vic, and if they find out that Vic isn't coming because you decided not to invite him or whatever, then there's going to be backlash from that end. So either way, you're going to face backlash for what you do. It's just, you have to choose to do what's right in this case. You got to look from the outside in. Make up your own mind on this, and not take one side or the other. You know? Whether or not Vic stays gone is going to come down to the staying power of the people who criticize him. Well, here's the thing. I mean, Vic was gone for like for like the first month at least, like in January when this whole thing first began, January of 2019. Just because, you know, all of these things were being hurled at him. And then, you know, there was the whole Kamea-con thing where they said they weren't going to invite him, and then they did invite him, and then they weren't going to. I'm trying to remember the sequence of events. Because of the pressure placed on him by the fearless whammon that are Monica Rial, Jamie Markey, and Ron Toye. As well as Chris Sabat. But I mean, you know, like, he was gone for a little bit, but over time, as this lawsuit is dragged out, and as more and more people have seen what's going on, they know what's happening. They know what's going on, and they figured out most of this was bogus, and most of it was you know, was inaccurate. Especially I think that really hit ahead once the depositions happened, because at that point, the depositions were available for the whole of YouTube to see. And so they were able to see these people for the liars that they are. And I think that really motivated them in terms of bringing Vic back, the heads of the cons that watched those depositions. But anyway. Now listen to now look at this quote right here, where she basically says, where Renfamous basically says, putting pressure on the cons. So here she's basically calling for people to be like Rial, Toye, Marky, and Sabat, where you're putting pressure on a con for even considering inviting Vic Mignogna. I mean, which is essentially blackmail. You're essentially blackmailing them for doing something, which to an extent is illegal. It can be viewed as an illegal offense, especially like with Kamehacon. Granted, Vic still ended up going, but if they didn't re-invite him, that would have been TI. That would have been tortious interference with the contract on their part, and they would have been dead in the water if Vic hadn't gone to Kamehacon. And I don't know this for a fact, but they might have also interfered with some other cons that he was going to. But anyway. Learned his lesson, he still has that art in his fan base. The threat of backlash needs to have an imposing potential financial consequence. So again, here's where they're threatening financial, not really attacks, but they're threatening financial backlash, whether or not, because, you know, like, if you invite Vic Mignogna, I'm not paying to come, or something like that. Which, in that case, don't come. Don't come. You don't like him coming to the con? Get out. Might be harsh, but you don't like Vic Mignogna coming to the con? When he has a contract to go? Then get out. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, oh my gosh. But anyway, and again, here's where Alexis, which is basically the host of the podcast, at least according to this he is, I think, where he basically calls people to, basically do what I just said, that, people were going to show up to the con until you heard that Vic Mignogna was coming on. Which, I mean, that's just awful. That's absolutely awful. And again, you're basically calling on someone to blackmail someone into not bringing someone to an event that they're contracted for, or that they're invited for. Alright, so the last little bit here, I realize this has been a long video, but I'm gonna try to wrap it up here. So, key points to hit are the fact that he has a reputation now. Montello, Renfamous, Marzgurl, Marzgurl. What reputation would that be? And on top of that, here's the thing: it would have been one thing if you had just said he has a reputation, but then you had to throw the word documented in there, meaning that you have legitimate, irrefutable proof that he's a predator, that he's a monster. Again, what documented evidence are you talking about? Just in the fact that you can Google his name? Anyone can write anything on a Google search. Like, take Wikipedia, for example. Anyone can write anything on a Wikipedia page. That's why it's not deemed acceptable in high school or college courses. Because anyone can write whatever they want on there. Because it's a free game. On that site. That's why I usually use IMDb for my source checking. Just because it's a lot more, reliable. And what Renfamous here says says that we can't play dumb anymore. I'd like to hear an elaboration on that, if I may. And no, that doesn't mean I'm bringing Renfamous on my channel. I'm not. I'm not. It doesn't matter how many people keep clamoring to me for me to do it. I'm not bringing her on my channel. This is a family-friendly channel. Well, I try to keep it family-friendly to the best of my ability, at least in terms of what comes out of my mouth. Although sometimes I can get heated, and I do apologize for that. But I'm afraid that if I did bring her on my channel, number one, I'd be playing right into her hands, which I'm absolutely not doing. And number two, that would compromise the family-friendly nature of my channel, which I'm certain a lot of people wouldn't want to see. So, anyway. Can't play dumb anymore. Readily accessible. Again, Montello is basically calling for people to blackmail a con into not inviting Vic. Which, again, given the enormous amount of evidence that has come out to the contrary, I don't really know. I don't really know, but given the amount of evidence that has come out to the contrary, to him being a monster, I'd be very shocked if they believed them. If these cons believed these three idiots. These three idiots. These three whamming. These three whamming. But anyway. And again, then Montello kind of closes it out with a, with this little thing here, where she basically says that, you can go over to the Garland Times Herald and basically get a story on the front page. Which, again, you would just be... That sounds like desperation. That sounds like desperation, if you ask me. Because of the fact that... you're basically doing whatever you can to get your message across to people and to get it exposed to as many people as possible. And stuff like that. But anyway, I want to know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this. Again, the link to this article is going to be in the description below so that you guys can go check it out for yourselves. And yeah, let me just know your thoughts in the comments, and, oh, by the way, there was a, before I go, there was a deadline, put for the appellate court. They have a brief that they have to submit, for the appeal, and I believe that deadline is the 27th of this month, so... it won't be long now before we know what the appellate court has to say. And on top of that, Sam Johnson, Jamie Markey's attorney, also let the court know that he was going on vacation. So think of that what you will, but I'm kind of getting off track. But anyway, like I said, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The link to this article is going to be down below as well, so you guys can go check it out. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date. I'm gonna try to keep you guys up to date on the situation as best I can. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and God bless. See ya.